Hello, hello, and welcome to another wonderful episode of Submitted for Your Approval, the weekly card review show for Collective, the community-created card game where you create the cards, and sometimes I start the finger guns too early. I am joined today by my faithful co-host and now newfound cult member, Grief.
Howdy, folks.
Gonna spread the word of our Lord and Savior, whatever it is you're into this week. No. It's one of those, like, we were talking about it before the show. It's like one of those, like, snuggy, like, full body blankets. I'm also joined today by my faithful or by my non-heathen co-host, Empty Folder.
Hello, everyone.
My non-cultist co-host. I'm gonna jump straight into
velvet light.
I'm gonna jump straight into the accepted submissions. So accepted here means that they were voted in, and as a result, they're in the collection. Starting with the Spring Salamander is a 1-drop neutral 1/1 elemental Salamander Lizabo tribes, right? With Agile, and when this enters play from your graveyard or deck, create a copy. So I think Elemental was just like asking to like make this like an absolutely miserable experience for people who are running like the Elemental, like, you know. I wouldn't be surprised if that actually got nerfed, because I feel like there's some sort of awful thing you can do with the fact that Elemental's on there.
The things like from deck or graveyard, so all the hand cost shenanigans that Elementals usually do don't really work with it.
But doesn't they have like Elemental count in play shenanigans as well, or something like that?
Yeah, but
there are better options.
Yeah, it's also a 1-cost 1/1 Agile, which is probably worth mentioning. I thought this was interesting. I really like this design specifically, of course, for the 1-cost Matters deck, because it can be main decked, but if you can find a way to meet one of its triggers, you can get copies out and run it with the non-native synergies, but it already has Agile, right? So Haunted Yarn, in single player, you can do this with like Lesser Raised Dead. There's a lot of different ways you can run that there. Works well in Heldom, works well maybe with Elementals, depending. Super versatile card. Very glad this got in for the DC. What do you think, Grief?
Well, for the most part, this will probably run in Spirit decks or Reanimator decks that can just trigger the 1-cost reanimation effects or multi-reanimation, so you get multiple copies of it that are 1-attack Agile units. So why not? It's helpful just for micro. Sure, there are better copies for reanimation, but this is just okay. Now I ping you for 2 damage. It's okay. Yeah, sure. Elemental is very good. On it as a tribe as well as a Lazabo, but I don't think too much of it as a Lazabo. Sure, it synergizes with Sunrise, where if it is reanimated by the Pharaohs, you get multiple copies of it. But that's just a quirky little side effect. For the most part, the most important aspect about this card is just a neutral 1/1 for Agile. With Agile for any kind of deck. But yeah, Spirit and Mind will probably benefit the most from it.
Yeah. Empty, what do you think of this?
Yeah, I mean, the second Sunrise deck does run a decent bit of graveyard recursion. Although, like, they already do have a pretty solid 1-drop package, so might be tough to play this in there. As for like being a 1-drop Agile, currently it's honestly just like not worth running like this in the other 1-drop Agile and Heldom, just because there's so many pings floating around and like it's so crushing to get your 1-drop removed. It's not really worth the risk for pretty minimal gain. But hey, if we ever enter a standard format where everyone's not running 1-mana pings, you can run these and get some early XP.
Yeah.
Never going to happen.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. The Delayed Shipment is a 2-drop mind event from Adiv with Rebound, and create 5 prototypes in the top 10 cards of your deck. They have when drawn, draw a card. So yeah, this is sort of a side grade, like billionaire purchase type thing with a weird gimmick where this can give you extra draws. So obviously the big plus in this is if you are running Fortuno, this can get you a very, very steady stream of passive procs without having to do a big investment. Honestly, the biggest thing that really excited me the most about this, by the way, none of that stuff, was Imza Corella flawlessly mimicking Kaputomi's art style. Or like, it's like MZ and like the old collect. This art feels like it belongs to old collective. And I really, really just absolutely adore this art. It just meshes right in. Adif, nice to see a mention. Just one of my favorite arts in collective right now. Enough to make me like, maybe I should just pick up Fortuna just to see what this card can do. And of course, prototypes, you know, one cost matters, non-native matters. Sorry, I have to do it. I'm contractually obligated at this point. Grief, what do you think of this card?
Basically just Fortuna meta stuff, or Fortuna card draw meta stuff. The interesting part is that, yeah, this is more prototype robot support. Moving forward, this would be a pretty interesting niche for Fortuna to introduce him to. So you have basically a prototype Matters deck that has multiple rebound effects, has multiple prototype card draw effects, and uses those card tokens as munition for other effects. This is kind of cool as a direction, especially since the card itself has rebound, so it counts for another card addition for Fortuna. So it's interesting to see where this will be brought to, considering the fact that, yeah, sure, you can probably in a quote-unquote worst case scenario draw all 5 copies of it and an extra card, and then okay, your procs for the future are kind of gone. But at that point, you just got 6 cards in hand.
One thing I do, if I recall correctly, if a unit loses an ability, or sorry, units only lose temporarily granted abilities when they die, right?
Yeah, it's when they leave play.
When they leave play specifically.
Yeah,
which
so
does mean you can combo this together with Door to a Familiar Place.
Yeah.
And Door to Elsewhere, and make this into a very potent card draw engine in and of itself. So that's another fun bit of synergy.
Because after you've redrawn the cards, they actually start to trigger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Empty. So I always love a Door to a Familiar Place combo. It's one of the favorite cards someone ever made as a riff off one of my things. So, Empty, what do you think of this?
Yeah, I actually think that's sort of the main use case for this card, is if you're doing like shuffle shenanigans with your hand, and you can abuse this to get a bunch of extra cards. I think in terms of just getting Fortuna procs, this is just too reliable. Like, you really want to, like, if you're putting 2 mana into something, you really want to, like, for sure get your procs for the next couple of turns off like a Billionaire Purchase. It's just a lot more efficient to run Billionaire Purchase, I think. But for the weird janky combo deck, this is great.
Yeah, definitely a cool card for sure, and I absolutely adore that art. The Batterytender is a 3-drop mine 2/2 robot made from Tutela with rebound, and store the bottom unit in your deck and give it +2/+2, and on brilliance, fetch a unit. What is store and fetch? This is actually something I had a little bit of feedback on the card lab. Your store is a subzone of banish. Whenever a card gets stored, it goes into that subzone, and whenever you fetch a card, it gets pulled from the store to your hand. I had a couple designs with it, including one I submitted this week that didn't really work, but it was originally Bonk's idea. It was originally supposed to be a tourist shop, but that just included a lot of words on things, so we might shorten that out a little bit. I think, I don't know, Batterytender is pretty cute. Gives you a means to store 2 units, fetch 2 units, card draw over a period of time. And I'm really, really excited to see what else we can do with this new mechanic. I want to see a bunch of people design for it. I want to see a DC for it because it's just that cool. Empty, what do you think of this?
Yeah, I didn't know Atora was originally going to use this mechanic. That would have been really cool. I'm actually kind of sad that that's not a thing now.
Well, we can update it to where Atora shop is the store.
Yeah, well, I think this is like just a very solid mechanic. It's just sort of like a generic, like sort of store and then draw cards for later. But I really like mechanics like this where like the cards are solid on their own, but then you have like sort of side synergy with each other where like you can fetch stuff earlier than the card intends. Like for this, you have Brilliance fetch, but you could have another card that's just like a 1-mana summon fetch in order to get it off earlier if you need to. Or maybe like you're in KM and you have cards that store a bunch of stuff, and then your Brilliance fetch a unit, maybe that triggers like 2 or 3 times. You get a whole bunch of cards. It's a really cool mechanic.
Yeah. So I'm excited to see what we can do with it. I'm going to keep submitting designs for it. And I would advise anybody watching this, think about it. It could be a really fun mechanic. I would love to see a whole bunch of these kind of cards in the game. So these cards are not accepted. These cards are active is the word we use, which means you can vote on them right now if you want to. Starting with the Returning Urn is a 6-drop neutral artifact from Mirage. With this cost 1 less for each time damage is dealt to an enemy this turn. Revive a less than 4 cost unit. It duels the lowest HP enemy. So I thought this was really, really interesting for a couple things. First of all, if you have a means to do it, which it's not without possibility, but it's maybe a little bit tricky. Dunewalkers can proc this, even though it's supposed to be like a Lizabo flavor thing. But if you got Lizabo, then, you know, Duelists can proc this. And it's new Revive cards. I really, really like, and I actually highlighted 2 of them this episode. Us using this Revive terminology and us using Revive mechanics. It's neutral and can be run in anything, and it seems like a really versatile include. So let's just vote this into the game already. Grief, what do you think of this?
Fine. For the longest time, I wasn't too much of a fan of the revive wording because of specific use cases during the past where stuff got added to hand, stuff got added to the board, the deck, whatever, and people kind of utilized revive for, return from graveyard to hand. Well, that's not really revive, that's just putting the card on the hand and so on and so forth. So actually cleaning that wording up so we can actually use revive for reanimation to board is something that I'm pretty fine with. Regardless of that, I just like the card in general because it's long that we have temporary on damage trigger effects. We had certain effects like these in the past that kind of were also for burn effects. I'm sorry. So seeing that as a neutral reanimation effect is pretty cool since this allows you to basically keep up the pressure for a certain aggro burn strats. So regardless of affinity, you always can find a way to utilize this card. Specifically since the cost range of the card is 3 or less.
MP, what do you think of this?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit awkward. It seems really hard to get this to a reasonable cost. I think like around maybe 3 mana is where I would consider playing this. And like getting 3 damage procs out of combat is pretty tricky. I mean, I do like this design. I just think it's a little bit awkward to run.
Try Huenai.
Yeah, but then you're paying 6 mana for it. Like on turn 6, that's too late.
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of times, like the game is already decided by turn 5.
I see. Okay. It'd be really, really great if I actually wrote the vote counts on my cards, but I forgot. The Chocolade Sculptor is a 4-drop 9/3/3 Sweet Golem Artisan from Zookros. With Awaken to create a copy of this, then silence it. An entrance, your candies cost 1 less next turn. So what that Awaken effectively does is make sure that you can get the entrance because it will proc, but then you don't get the make another copy of the dude. I think this, and this is sitting at 0. I actually did remember where this was sitting, and this made me sad because I actually like it, and not just because it looks like it's about to bump a rail off a plank of chocolate. The art is, we talked about the art a lot in art sharing. Very easy to misinterpret, but we all really liked it. I think it's a pretty piece. MC did really well on this. MT, what do you think? Did you think he was going to bump a rail off the plank of chocolate?
No, but now that you brought it up, I can't unsee it. Yeah, I don't know. This is another one that's sort of weird. I feel like candy, especially in mine, it's really torn between like wanting to play your candies and wanting to dump them for effects. And I don't know. I feel like the archetype would be stronger and like more cohesive if they just went with one or the other. Like you want to save up your candies for like the cherry and Valentina, the Queen of Hearts and stuff. But then there are cards like this and the mushroom that encourage you to play them all. Sort of leaves the archetype in a weird spot where you're not sure whether they're fuel or not.
Okay, that's an interesting point. So anything you think of to possibly improve this?
Maybe it could give your candies rebound next turn.
That would be cool. Grief, what do you think of this?
I personally don't really see too much of an issue. My personal issue with this card is that it costs 4. At 3 cost, I can see it. At 4, it's a little bit unreasonable. Sure, it's an entrance that basically makes your candies cost 1 less, but it's a very parasitic archetype in the first place that kind of has to decide what it actually does with its candies in the first place during deck building already. At this point, you can probably afford to have a card that just helps you out a little more. Something that's probably a little weird is the copy the effect and don't have the silence ability on the don't have the awakening ability on the next copy.
Like honestly, I just wish it just said create a copy of this on Awaken. Like,
yeah,
it's still gonna be super slow. It's Awaken 2, takes forever. And then, especially at a 4-drop, right? So the first time that copy's going off is at turn 6. I don't know why we're silencing the card at that point. I really don't. Even at 3, I don't know why we're silencing the card at that point.
To be honest, this could be. I mean, if you really want to push this, make it a 2-cost 2/2. Awaken 3, just create a copy. At that point, it's pretty pushed. Does very good utilitarian things for candies, regardless of archetype you want to play with it. And at that point, you still have pretty quote-unquote infinite value, as people usually call it. No, it's just a recurring unit that kind of helps your archetype.
Yeah. Okay, Grave Assault is a 6-drop spirit event from Walnut with Trick and Mill 4. Choose 2 4 or less cost units to revive and ready. So for those of you, so yeah, Trick, you can play it after attacks are declared to get 2 small, actually 4 or less cost, so even some medium-sized units out of this. 4/6. Nice little pun in the name. The art's actually pretty cool. How do we feel about this? Grief.
Honestly, not because it's a Walnut card, but I like the concept in general. I love it because we're seeing trick cards that cost more than 3. I don't care even if it's a trick card that costs 10 with no innate cost reduction. I want to see trick cards from costs all across the board that do very interesting things besides just putting a dude on the board or being kind of removal. I want more utility, and this is just that. It's deep on call with a trick, and that's cool.
MT, what do you think of this?
Yeah, I agree with Grief. I think this is a great trick design. The idea, like having this sort of catch-all card where you can just like float your mana over and over again in case your opponent plays something threatening, and then when they don't, you blow out their attack. Like that's great for a control deck or sort of a mid-range deck. And like with Deepborn Call, like there's a ton of weird graveyard shenanigans you can do with this. Just a solid design.
Yeah. Definitely really fun. The Huenai are a 2-drop neutral 1/3 Wisp equipment from Chromazone with your equipment have Chroma and summon, give a unit splash +1 attack. So, for those of you not following, Chroma is not what Chroma used to be before Nick banned it. Chroma is a new keyword. It says this has, and it's not actually a keyword. Let's be clear. It's either 4 keywords or it's a hook word. This has no off affinity penalty in the specified affinity. If unspecified, this has no off affinity penalty in all affinities. So this doesn't change affinity, and this doesn't reduce cost in the original sense. It just scrubs the off affinity penalty, which is a little more than a little goofy, but it does actually make sense. I kind of like the new Chroma. I think it's actually maybe a good direction to do it. It all depends on what the higher ups say in the way of approval, which I don't know if Zinker got. I saw him ask. I don't think I heard an answer, but this is maybe a good way to do it. And I don't know if I like the design in particular for Huenai, but it's 2 and it does effectively like remove the off affinity penalty in kind of a massive way. But so I'm not too passionate about the design, but I think the new keyword design is maybe cute. Grief, what do you think of this?
To be honest, ever since the penumbra rule, I basically always thought like, what the fuck? Why do we have an explicit rule to forbid stuff like this? That is in the old age, as a committee, councilor, or whatever you want to call us member, I don't have anything against this kind of direction. That's why I wanted to bring it up, because I love this card. This is a quote-unquote parasitic way of doing this, where you have one specific tribe that benefits from it. It can be technically actions, it can be technically units, depending on what your equipment deck looks like. But even forward, this is very generic equipment.deck support that does it in a very clean way. Sure, Chroma is maybe not the cleanest keyword right now, but this is just a very cool way of doing it, especially with the summon effect, where you just put splash on a random unit that will then passively get buffs because you're playing an off affinity equipment deck whatsoever. Any kind of card that actually generates affinity-based equipments for you, or copies them on hand, or scouts them, or whatever, this will benefit from it. Problem is, you need probably more ways to justify overloading your deck with off-affinity cards when you're not KM, with Perma being the only outlier that can probably get away with it. But that's it. Overall, I love the direction of the card. I just want to see more support for this kind of thing.
MD, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't really have any problem with doing Chroma like this either. In my mind, it's the same sort of thing as like Second Sunrise, where you're sort of removing the affinity penalty for a very specific group of cards to let players build a deck that you otherwise wouldn't be able to because of the affinity system, which I think is great. I think it's a great way to manipulate affinity to give people more deck building options. For this card in particular, it's kind of tricky. Since outside of KM, like if you don't draw this thing, you're like spending 1 extra mana for all your stuff, which is not great. But hey, maybe in KM it can do something.
Yeah. Yeah, so I must say, yeah, I don't think this would technically run into problems with the Penumbra rule. I'm just more worried about where it sits with the old Chroma ruling, but hopefully Mystic's willing to overturn that thing. So, Vaeras Prison is a 7-drop mine 0/8 place from Saga with can't attack, ward, and charm, and enemy units can't attack, and entomb, exhaust all units, create and ready Vaera. Vaera is a 7-drop mine 7/5 undead dragon lord from Saga with overrun, flying, and end of turn steal 1 HP from all other exhausted units. So what a nice queen. The kind of card that once, as soon as it hits the sub, Empty and I immediately know not to select it because grief inevitably will. So let's talk about this. On turn 7, the board shuts down. All units are frozen, or your opponent's units can no longer attack. They have to kill this prison. Probably with a duelist, because it has ward.
It has charm though.
It has charm. Or yeah, not a duelist. Yeah, you just use the charm, take this thing down. Then Vaera comes out, and if you do not immediately start killing this thing, you're going to be in a world of hurt. Absolutely glorious design. I think it's really cool, really flavorful. JTAT's art just so wonderful on that. I'm so glad we could highlight this that today. So let's actually talk about the card. Empty, it is your turn.
Yeah, this is a really neat design. Honestly, like a really needed tool for control decks to like have a late drop that you can play without dying, basically. Like you put down this big block of ice and force your opponent to like work their way through it. And like, I mean, against Dunewalkers, which is like a really popular deck right now, you're going to be getting a ton of duels, probably at least 4, even if they have like one of the Dunewalker damage doublers out. And then you just exhaust their whole board anyway. So you still get your full turn, pretty much regardless of whatever's happening. Yeah, just sort of this great control tool.
Grief, what do you think of this?
I love my fogs, and I love Merit Large as well as Thing in the Eyes. And this is basically it, but your opponent has to chew through your card. It's like the most obnoxious way of doing this kind of design, and I love it for it, because it's a 7-cost unit that does basically nothing but being an absolute house that sits there and says, nope. I love it. Sure, you can maybe blow it up prematurely, but have to deal with in a fog effect. Maybe there is some way where you want to trigger it itself with stuff like forbidden fruit effects or shit like that, where you're just killing your own prison, exhaust the entire board, and end of turn just steal the HP of every unit on the board that your opponent controls. That's pretty cool to do, but not really the best way you want to get your mileage out of it. At best, you want to kind of have a plan B in hand, where you know that, okay, cool, this can potentially be silenced. So if the ward is up, I'll just sacrifice it myself to get at least my dragon off and grant me a fog effect. If they shut down the dragon, sure, whatever, it's still a 7/5.
Yeah. Overall, really cool design. I do think it's very balanced as well. And I really, really hope this gets in.
So I just realized something great. If you have a sentient ghoul, you can send your sentient ghoul into it and just get a copy of the prison in play.
Yes, this is so great.
Oh, that is rough.
I didn't want to say that.
Yeah, so in Brick, that's really good, or against Brick, that's potentially bad.
People forget that Charm works both ways, so
yeah,
there are very cool shenanigans that you can do with on-damage effect triggers, dealing damage to your own prison.
Yeah.
I don't think this is a big issue. Sentient Ghoul almost never sticks around until it's turn 7 anyway.
The Ghostfire Invigorator is a 3-drop spirit 3/3 undead specter cultist from nowhere in particular with duelist, and when you discard a card, ready an allied specter. So first of all, that art, I don't know anything about fancy crafts, but wow, that art. This gives you the potential to get maybe some extra duels off. I don't necessarily know what this does, all in the Spectre deck. Grief, maybe you had an idea and wanted to tell me.
Thing is, Spectres are in a very odd spot. They are kind of a mid-rangey deck that pretty much runs out of tools the moment they hit like the 4-cost range. So this is kind of support for both ends of the spectrum for your onboard specters, which has been the shift like since 1 year ago, where people designed more and more spectrum meta stuff that is on board. Some of them have active, some of them don't. Some of them have duelist due to the undead spectre combo of most of these kinds of cards. And this helps you out to at least have some form of board presence. If this overall helps the Spectre game plan, I don't really see that. But it's good to see at least a Spectre that's a 3-cost unit for once, that has some utility purposes. And for the most part, you will just duel a unit and discard a card, ready this dude, and duel another unit again. For the most part, it will just target itself.
Mm-hmm. MT, what do you think of this?
Yeah, this is like a very needed card for Spectres, I think. Just like help them break into the meta. If we had Ellum, this would be so nuts, but we don't anymore. Honestly, when I look at this, mostly what I see is a way for Spectres to actually stand a fighting chance against Doomwalkers. Like having repeatable duels like this is just so effective against what Doomwalkers are trying to do. And like, it's a really bad matchup right now. Like they need the help in that.
So cool stuff. Yeah, I like it. I hope it gets in. The Tale of Two Brothers is a 1-drop strength legend from Seraphel with innate. Shuffle Jailer and Jehoel into your deck, then draw an angel. Whenever Jailer and Jehoel attack together, your angels become immortal. I'm on the struggle bus today. Part 1, Jailer the Elegist is a 3-drop strength 5/5 angel from Seraphel with flying and summon. Silence an enemy unit. It becomes a 5/5 flying dragon. And Dragon's Bane Joel is a 5-drop strength 5/5 angel from Seraphel with flying, and if your opponent has a flying unit, this has agile and costs 2 less. So I have a myriad of love for this card and a myriad of issues. First of all, this is the super cool, super flavorful angel deck or angel card that wants you to only run a select few angels, and probably like not except for some maybe higher end ones, because it's encouraging you to get an angel out of your deck. The other thing is this is a 1-drop innate draw a unit card, which as far as consistency tools go can potentially be pretty good depending on how you're running it.
Yeah, but the thing is, it puts 2 angels in your deck right beforehand, so you're immediately like ruining your chances to draw the angel you want.
Unless one of the angels you want's one of these 2.
It isn't. You don't want these in your opening hand.
Well, okay, yeah, I don't know. So you're telling me that 3-drop 5/5 flyer isn't that good?
Well, not when you just gave your opponent a 5/5 flyer.
If they have a unit out, I guess. Okay. MT, what do you think of this? I think this card is not there yet.
Yeah, so like the idea of having like an angel quest where like you get 2 angels out and then like all your angels get immortal, that's like super cool. It's just, this is a very clunky design where it sort of encourages you to not run many angels. Angels don't have any way to tutor these two out. It's really unreliable, and if one of them dies, you can basically never get the reward unless you do like a bunch of revive shenanigans. And you're just never going to see both of them in the same game. I think the only way you'd see both of them is if you run like 3 copies of this quest and then just play them at the start and draw a bunch of copies of these two. It's just an overall like very clunky design. I think if GoChris went back to the drawing board a little bit and reworked this, like this could be super cool and interesting. The current version just isn't there.
Grief, what do you think of this?
Flavor on the flavor spectrum, very cool. Question is, Jelier, the Egoist, does he need a target? I think because it's a summon, he has to have a target.
Oh, yeah.
So regardless of being a 3-mana 5/5 with flying, you still give as empty set your opponent basically a kaiju. That neuters that there's the effectiveness of your Jelier. Jagal, he's cool. Probably the only reason to run the card, funny enough, because Egoist is like he's like the trendy brother that always fucks up. While Dragonsbane is the dude that always has to take care of the shit his younger brother does. Because Egoist is the TikTok guy that kind of pisses off the wrong person and has to deal with a 5/5 flying dragon. And Dragonsbane comes down, basically says, "What the fuck did you do again? Now we have to now I have to clean up your bullshit. At least I was nearby. Okay, cool. As long as I'm here, we can do this shit." And then Egoist gets nuked out from orbit, or Dragonsbane because he's the better card. And then you're sitting there and saying, "Oh shit! Now my angels aren't immortal anymore."
Yeah. Yeah, I love the flavor on this. I just think it still has so many issues.
Yeah.
So let's talk about a dragon now. Lucas the Vengeful is a 5-drop mine 4/6 dragon arcanist from Talira. With your units with tribes get buffs. Text crunch, whatever. Or not even text crunch, this is a legendary dude. Your elementals get +2 attack, your humans get +2 HP, your arcanists get frenzy 3, your dragons get vigilant. Active, if you have another unit of each of those tribes, transform this. Lucas the Dark Blue is an 8-drop mine 4/6 dragon arcanist from Talira. With flying ward, your units have +2/+2 and frenzy 3, and your dragons have vigilant. So I remember thinking to myself, man, Battle Bond was a great Magic the Gathering set, and man, I wish I had more people to draft with. But I bought a couple packs and I looked through them. I got really lucky and I pulled one of the special partner commanders. There's a white knight that buffs dragons and a dragon that buffs knights. And I was like, oh man, I could take Changeling and I could run a really, really wacky thing, an idea I've never heard of. I call it Duo Tribal. This thing's trying to be Quadro Tribal. What is with that? That is like, Duo Tribal is a wacky idea to begin with. But at least it's got some sanity to it, right? This is just bonkers.
No, not really.
I feel it is. Whose turn is it? Let me double check. It's yours, Grief. So you tell me why it's not bonkers.
First of all, yeah, the wording thing is kind of an issue. But that can be done post card getting in. This is the last iteration of the card. The first one was a little bit on the confusing spectrum, but it's a super tribe. It's a super tribe lord, which is kind of okay. Problem was that Lucas before was like, you will never use this active because he will just suck. Because his dragon form was way worse. His current form still says, why do you ever want to turn him into a dragon? For the innate protection and swinging with him, that's it. Outside of that, he is just a super tribal lord that sits there for your deck that runs human arcanists and elemental arcanists, because let's be honest, for the most part, arcanists are double tribe cards that are either humans or elementals. For the most part, elemental arcanists, which means that the majority of your deck has Frenzy 3 and +2 attack, which is pretty damn bonkers. Looking back at the Salamander, if you actually are able to reanimate the Salamander, which is an elemental, you get that dude back with 2 attack, meaning you reanimate two 3 attack units that have agile, which is pretty cool. Let that sink in. Outside of that, sure, you can build the Menagerie deck, but for the most part, you don't give a shit.
Yeah.
At all, you have your random multi-tribal card, and holy shit, whenever you actually hit a unit that has all the 4 tribes on it, which will never be the case, but probably 3 tribes on it, like Elemental Human Arcanist or Elemental Dragon Arcanist, then that's a pretty damn tough unit. And Lucas is good for that to just drop in there. The Dragon part will nearly never come up.
I do like the multi-lord effect. I think multi-lords are a great thing for a game like Collective, because how we have a weird relationship with tribes. We have a couple tribes that see a lot of support, and then a lot of tribes that sit there doing nothing. And then we have tribe sharing effects and like cares about sharing tribes or whatever. This gives us a means to get a tribal lord for 4 tribes in at once. And I definitely think that's a virtue of the card that I really enjoy. The rest of it seems a little crazy, but this thing's sitting at 7, so it's probably going to get in. MT, what do you think of this?
Yeah, I really like the multi-tribe aspect of it. I think that it immediately gives this like 2 decks that it's relevant in. My one gripe with the card is I wish the like dragon form was more powerful. So it was actually worth like going for this deck. Like currently it just sort of isn't. Like it's too much work for, like, sure, you make your board like really good in combat, but at that point, like, why are you building your whole deck around that? Like, you're not going to immediately win the game. You're just going to swing in and get chump blocked down with Frenzy. Like, it's not doing anything. I don't know. But yeah, for the Elemental and Arcana synergy, like right off the bat, it's pretty good. And then, I mean, it gives itself Vigilant and Frenzy 3. So on its own, like, this is this is a pretty good beater.
We're gonna start seeing Deface get some more play now. And our last pick of the week is the Blubble. Is a 3-drop strength 1/1 alien from Carthian. With Summon, create an ethereal copy of this in hand and Harmonize. For those of you who are wondering, why did I come up with this? So I actually had an old card that never got in, that was connected to a very dark period in Collective's history, the incident. For those of you who know what it is, it's whatever. But anyways, the idea was, I wanted to come up with sort of like a Gremlins XP, the whole alien pet type thing, that the alien pet that gets out of control. But I didn't really have a good design for it. And then I saw the Pearl Maw rework where the doubloons were getting changed to refresh 2 mana. And then I came up with this fella, where all it really does is gets out of control. And the more of them there are, the stronger they are. But people were like, oh, but if you make this thing cost 2, then you're just trading doubloons for these and it gets way too powerful. And I was like, okay, I'll make it cost 3. And now I have a feeling this thing is absolutely not going to get in. But let's talk about why, starting with Empty Folder.
Yeah, the problem is it's just very hard to balance. At 2, you run into a situation kind of similar to like current Promod chimps, where you just save up all your doubloons, and then on like turn 5 or whatever, you just like put all your doubloons into one card and completely swing the board immediately. However, with the current version, it's really, really slow and very difficult to get enough combos to actually hit critical mass and swing the board. It's just something where like it gets exponentially more powerful the more of them you play. So like a 1 cost adjustment is a huge deal.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't think this is. I don't know. I myself struggled with it, but I wanted to
I
post
think
it because I put all that work into the art. So
maybe bumping the base stats a little would help, or
Okay.
giving it a keyword.
Other than harmonize, okay.
Yeah.
Duelist, no.
Anything but duelist, please.
Ambush. Ambush.
Ambush.
Ambush
Man.
would be good.
Vigilant would be the thing because they just drank all that coffee.
Now
Grief,
that
what do
would
you
be
think?
agile. That would be agile or frenzy.
Yeah.
Frenzy equal to bubbles you control.
Grief, what do you think of this?
I find it's cute. I don't really have too much of a problem with it. Sure, I would probably prefer a 2-cost version of it, or a 3-cost 2/2 version of it. Sure, you can also do the 1/2 ambush 3-cost variant, as I said. But for the most part, it's justifying card. Sure, it's currently a little bit hard to justify to run it, but it's there to be experimented with.
Yeah. Okie doke. I don't know where it's sitting at, so we can't really talk about that aspect of the card. I'm gonna hold the shirt. Sort of a kind of slow week. Like we saw a couple really big standouts. I don't think any of us are going to be really surprised on midweek. I could be wrong about that. But it seems to me that I already kind of know what's getting in. And I think, honestly, we picked a lot of them, but we'll see. Thank you very much, Grief, for joining us. I know the new cult keeps you pretty busy with your dark robe.
I
It's
have
because it's part of the
to
Shadow
preach to
Council.
the masses just in a few minutes, so we have to make this quick.
And Empty, always great to have you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So like, comment, and subscribe. Remind me why I'm doing this thing. And keep on playing collective and keep on voting on cards. Bye.
May the velvet light shine upon you all.